All right, I think we are live. So let me get a second. I need to let the system populate here. Oh, we got 153. All right, so there's already 153 waiting on us. All right, guys, this is our live stream, special little edition live stream, Civil War. Okay. As you guys can see, we got pretty full house. I'm actually even expecting a couple more guys to pop on here, so they might jump on here in a little bit. We'll see what happens. But I got a special panel I assembled tonight, and I kind of got a wide variety of guys, different backgrounds, a lot of experience, different points of view. So make for a nice little healthy discussion, I think. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to go around. I'm going to introduce everybody first, and then we'll start going around the horn and start kicking this can around, okay? So I appreciate, first and foremost, appreciate everybody jumping on. I appreciate all my guests coming on tonight for this. I think this is going to be a very healthy little discussion. So first, going around the horn, I got my first guy up. He's the normal part of the live stream here, but less with Pegasus Tests. Pegasus Tests is his YouTube channel. Be sure to check him out. He's a Marine combat veteran of Desert Storm, served in the early 90s, and he's also a black hat instructor at the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. So appreciate you coming on tonight, brother.
Good to be here, brother.
Next, we got the good doc, Dr. Christopher Larson. He's an accomplished author. He's written many books on small unit tactics. He's the original founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, going 40 years strong. He does have his own YouTube channel called Christopher Larson. So make sure you check that out. But just a plethora of knowledge. He's just an excellent contributing factor to this live stream. Just like always, Doc, glad to have you on tonight, bud.
Thank you.
All right, next guest. First time ever on the live stream. We got Micah. Now, Micah and I go way back. We served together in 2003 and in 2004 in Iraq for OIF 1. After we parted ways, he deployed again twice with 3-1, the Balls of the Corps, to Iraq. And then he did another deployment with 3-4 to Afghanistan. So guy's just a war fighter. You can tell just by looking at him, he's descended from Vikings. But the guy is just unbelievably funny guy, man. I haven't seen this guy since 2004, and wow, man, he's just bringing back so many memories just seeing him. So I'm glad to have you on, brother. And
thanks for having me, man.
Hey, one thing I got to clarify: you got NJP'd in 2003 in Iraq, right?
I got what now?
Did you get NJP'd during the invasion in 2003?
Oh yeah, I've been NJP'd 5 times, and that was I got one of them in country. I mean, we could talk about that. The Marine Corps frowns upon misplacing a pair of night vision goggles in the middle of a invasion. You know, they got buried in a fighting hole. What are you going to do?
Right. All right. So what I was getting at is I believe you probably hold the title of first Marine ever NJP in the country of Iraq. Congratulations.
Oh my God.
Anyways, one of the main reasons I brought him on tonight is because I wanted to have a diversity of thought. And I know Micah, he's been on the fence. I've seen this guy talk, about both sides. I don't know where his political affiliation is. I don't think he has one. He just calls it the ways he sees it. And I really appreciate that. And that's why one of the reasons I brought him on tonight. So again, I appreciate you coming on tonight, brother. All right, moving on. So we got Michael. So Michael and I go back to, I don't even remember what year was that. 08 time frame, maybe plus or minus a year. But we used to work together, not in the Marine Corps, outside one of my first jobs I held, leaving active duty Marine Corps. And I just remember having long discussions with Michael. We didn't always see eye to eye, but Michael served in the Marine Corps in MALS 41. He deployed in Iraq in 04 time frame. His MOS was a 60-46. I don't speak Pogue, so I'm not quite sure what that is.
King of the Pogues. That's all you need to know.
Oh my God.
No, I'm joking. But anyways, he's a veteran, obviously, And again, a diversity of thought, guys. I thought having different minds, guys that see things differently than myself and a lot of other people is always a good thing and healthy debate. And I thought this is a great topic to bring Michael on. So I really appreciate you coming on tonight, brother.
No, hey, pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
Awesome. Moving on, we got Chad. Chad's a good buddy of mine. We served together in Afghanistan in 2011 time frame with Bravo Company 123. Chad's a longtime grunt. He served in Fallujah in 04, and he was also in Initial Invasion in 03. So excellent war fighter. He served in LAR and just always has a excellent contributing factor to this live stream. He's also studying for his doctorate in military history, correct? Nope, sorry.
I will be soon.
Yeah, so we got a young Christopher Larson over here.
Without the sex robots.
Yeah. All right, moving on. So Mr. Richard Santiago. So Santiago, if you guys followed the One Shepherd Leadership Institute videos, you've probably seen him and recognized him as a familiar face. I've done many One Shepherd semesters with Santiago. He's a hard charger, man. Never quits on me. He's always up to go take the fight to the enemy at One Shepherd. So I know he's gone all over the country training at different civilian tactical oriented schools. So he's just a great individual, a true patriot and American, and a pleasure to have him on. This is his second time coming on the live stream. So thanks for coming on tonight, brother.
Glad to be here. First official time on.
All right, next we got Bruce. The shitters are full. Make sure you check out his YouTube channel at Bruce at Camp Barman. You guys, he's no stranger to my YouTube channel. He's my right-hand man. Bruce is a former aircraft mechanic. He also has worked armed security. He's gone across the country just like Richard Santiago and trained multiple times at other civilian-oriented tactical training schools. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. Always a pleasure having him on tonight. Thanks for coming on tonight, Bruce.
Thanks, guys.
All right, last but not least, I got Michael Britton. He's a retired Marine. After how many years did you serve?
With the broken time, 26 years.
26 years in the Marine Corps. All right. Also a retired what's that?
Kill.
Also a retired Alabama state trooper. He's a good friend of mine. We served together in Bravo 123 back when was our company first sergeant. I was his company gunnery sergeant. And man, he's just an awesome individual. Probably one of the straightest arrows I've ever met. And I still, to this day, as long as I've known you, I don't think I've ever heard you say a swear word. So
After this IT stuff right here, I probably am not tonight.
in any event, guys, that is our panel tonight. So as you can see, we got quite a few folks on. So I hope to try to keep this as orderly as possible. Obviously, there's going to be times where we're stepping on each other. So hopefully we can keep that to a minimum. But that being said, guys, so our topic tonight is the possibility of another American Civil War. You know, is it possible? Is it going to happen? If so, when is it going to happen? And what's it going to look like? So what I want to do first, before we start, kicking this around, I want to go around the horn. I'm going to go clockwise, essentially. And I just want a yes or no answer. Yes or no answer. Do you believe another Civil War? And I'm not going to talk about how that's going to look like yet, but do you believe something on the resembles another Civil War is going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years? Okay. So again, just a simple yes or no. Les.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's possible.
Typical lawyer.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
You there, Britton?
No.
No. All right, I'm going to go with in the next 10, 20 years, no as well. All right. All right, guys. So we got a large panel. So again, we're going to go clockwise. Let's try to keep it to maybe a couple minutes at most. Those of you that said yes and those of you said no, explain yourself as quickly as possible. Again, try to keep it to about 2 minutes each for each person. Les, you're up.
All right. I said yes because right now it's already started. We're just in a Cold War phase. Each of the two sides we have in this nation are firmly entrenched in their ideas and entrenched to the point that they're not listening to the other side. And each side is doing their own thing, and they're diametrically opposed. Oil and water, there's no accommodation anymore. There's no working things out. There's no talking with each other. In each side of the political spectrum, the extremists on both the right and the left are the ones making all the noise, getting all the coverage, polarizing everybody. The nation is splitting into groups, one being rural versus urban, another being have and have not. And single issues are letting people to define who they are. And they'll might say to a politician, well, you said A over on issue number 1, so I'm not going to listen to you anywhere on issue number 2. If you look at our media outlets, they're clearly defined as either being left or right. There's nothing middle of the road anymore, and the people in the middle of the road are getting squashed by either side. And when things get this diametrically opposed, it does not take much to force people to take politics to the next level, is what Clausewitz said. So, yes, I think we are heading towards a civil war. That being said, I don't want it to happen. Civil war is the worst form of warfare. I'm not going to speak for anybody else on the panel, but I know in the logistics businesses, I've gone on relief missions to Africa. Seeing the aftermath of civil war is the most horrible thing in the world, and it's nothing I want ever to happen here. But that being said, it's starting to look somewhat inevitable.
How do you put the genie back in the bottle? So, once Pandora opened her box, disease racked the world, right? Disease and the 4 horsemen. All right. So now you have to ask yourself, do you buy into the axiom that violence is a continuation of any human struggle? The legal courts, let's say that. Some people would argue economics. But the point is that we have arenas whereby we can have a conflict and we can agree that violence won't be used to resolve this conflict. But you have to have faith in those institutions. The question was, will we have a civil war in the next 10 to 20 years? I say it started in 1954 with the civil rights movement. And it's almost like other wars in history where people change sides. You know, the Democrats were on this side and then they switched to this side and the Republicans were on this side. That doesn't matter. We can track that down, and I'm certainly willing to do that this evening. But I'm going to argue that we've had a civil war in place since well before I was born. And again, it may have, in most of it, as Les alluded to, it was a Cold War. It wasn't a war of violent conflict necessarily, and sometimes it was. But nonetheless, we tried to solve this on other arenas. We don't, and we see Antifa shut down multiple cities at a time. So how are you going to, if you're saying, well, it's not a civil war like it was in the Revolutionary War and the American Civil War of the 1860s, because we have had civil war twice on this soil, and we're due for another. But it's not even that. It's not like I'm calling it weather. Oh, another rain cloud's going to come by. I'm saying the political climate is rife with it, and it has been for a very, very long time. So if we're not going to do this dance, how are you going to get the genie back in the bottle?
So, I mean, it's not like the talking points people aren't making aren't true. The country's probably never been more divided. Bridging that gap seems more and more unlikely. But what are they divided on? And it just seems like so much. And if you're going to get to the point where you're going to take up arms, which is a serious point, I mean, you're going to pull the trigger, you're going to, it's a serious point to get to. And we could take a look at what happened on January 6th. And we'll say, like, that's the closest you could get to saying, hey, we have an organized armed group that's displeased, trying to affect change or whatever. And that was a great talk. It's a good question, is what would a civil war look like? Because if you're going to talk about the original American Civil War, people were give me liberty or give me death. I'm not going to, it is what it is. You have these people from January 6th that are taking plea deals. They're like, you're right, I got carried away from something I learned on the internet. Like, to be so committed and to have an issue to be that committed about, to bring up arms. And I'm saying it's possible. One of the people I follow is that David Hogturd, some little high school kid that was in Stone. And for some reason, the nation thinks that this should be our scholar, our talking. This kid tweets the stupidest shit I've ever heard. And he's our nation's gun control expert. And if you take people's guns, that's going to piss people off. That could be a stepping point. I don't see people like, I don't see it being to a racial point where people are like, well, we should have slavery again. Let's all take up arms. Like, you start taking people's jobs, you start interfering with livelihood, you start depriving, and not just groups, large swaths of the population is how you get to a point of civil war. Otherwise, you have civil unrest in pocketed areas.
So I was kind of with Micah in that I didn't really want to answer yes or no. In terms of it, I don't want a civil war to occur. And honestly, there's some stuff that intrigued me from what the other panelists said that I would like to kind of like ask questions about, but I'll let everyone kind of run through that and go from there. But my feeling is that as long as our institutions that we have, the court system and Congress and the executive branch, as long as those are working as they're supposed to, it shouldn't happen. And I'm not saying it's working so great right now, but I'm more optimistic than pessimistic.
Well, I say in that time frame, yes, for several reasons. The propaganda game is strong, and the youth of this country has shown how easy and to what extent they can be manipulated to. And I mean, colleges and institutions have been successful in sort of eliminating patriotism amongst our youth. I mean, America's the greatest country in the world. All right. A lot of these kids don't know that. They don't see that. They don't believe that. They've never been showed that. I mean, we got we got the best constitution that exists in the world. I mean, it acknowledges our God-given rights and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I mean, would I want to kill a fellow countryman? No, absolutely not. But in that time frame, I think it's possible, and I don't think it'll be a long one. I mean, I'm pretty sure first action will be initiated by, dumb kids that are just, following for reasons that aren't worth it. But I'd say in that time frame, yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. So I answered initially no. I'm not sure if that surprised some of you or not. I want to clarify a couple of things. I see a lot of comments where people are saying that, you shouldn't want civil war. And I don't think anyone here who answered yes wants civil war. No one knows how ugly war can be than those of our veterans that have seen it. And I can probably assure you that I won't speak for them, but I'm sure that none of them are hoping for civil war, but rather simply stating that they think that could happen in the period of time frame that Brent lined out. And that's the real reason that I answered no. I think the time frame is off, and I'll tell you why. My whole life, ever since I got involved with following what's going on in the country and I was old enough to shoot, I've been told by different individuals and different groups that there are reasons, there are flashpoints right around the corner. There are indicators that civil war is right around the corner, and I need to be ready to go. I found over this long life that I've had that those simply were untrue. Many of those threats are no longer threats today. They were misperceived. And many of those immediate flashpoints that were right around the corner, there was a spark and it never went anywhere, and they're gone. And there are new ones now. So when I hear people running around going, oh my God, this just happened, so we're closer to civil war than we've ever been. Well, maybe simply through the fact of time, we're closer than we've ever been, but I don't believe that it's anywhere immediate. I could change my mind tomorrow, and I want to reserve my right to do so, because something could happen tomorrow to change things. In terms of looking just through our history in my lifetime, I don't think that politically we're closer today than we've ever been. I think we were probably closer in the late 60s during the Vietnam War. There was probably more revolution, more reason to want to overthrow our government at that time, more divisive groups than there are today. Than there are today. There were at that time. It's certainly a divisive time that we live in. But I think that one other thing that we'll look at, and I'm going to try to keep this brief, and maybe we can come back to this, is the type of people we have in our country today that are pushing for that. Do they really have the fight in them to continue the fight once they see the face of war and what that looks like? I personally don't think many of them do. And that would mean that the moment it started, it would end fairly quickly when people start realizing that their lives are actually being lost.
All right. Well, a lot of good points there. Les kind of stole my thunder. But I agree with Doc that we are practically already in a civil war. We've never been so divided before. But I wanted to take a different route here. Bear with me, but I want to read a couple paragraphs from a book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Haidt's a social psychologist. He's an expert. Not a man of the right. He's a man of the left. But I want to read something that I found very interesting that really applies to this question and this topic. In a study I did with Jesse Graham and Brian Nosek, we tested how well liberals and conservatives could understand each other. We asked more than 2,000 American visitors to fill out the Moral Foundations questionnaire. 1/3 of the time, they were asked to fill it out normally, answering as themselves. 1/3 of the time, they were asked to fill it out as they think a typical liberal would respond. And 1/3 of the time, they were asked to fill it out as a typical conservative would respond. This design allowed us to examine the stereotypes that each side held about the other. More important, it allowed us to assess how accurate they were by comparing people's expectations about quote unquote typical partisans to the actual responses from partisans on the left and the right. Who was best able to pretend to be the other? The results were clear and consistent. Moderates and conservatives were most accurate in their predictions, whether they were pretending to be liberals or conservatives. Liberals were the least accurate, especially those who described themselves as very liberal. The biggest errors in the whole study came when liberals answered the care and fairness questions while pretending to be conservatives. When faced with questions such as, one of the worst things a person could do is hurt a defenseless animal, or justice is the most important requirement for society, liberals assumed that conservatives would disagree. I think you got one side of the political spectrum that really doesn't understand the other. And I think that's very, very dangerous ground that we're on right now. There are some ways that we can bring us back together, but I don't know how it's possible at this point. Again, Jonathan Haidt, recommend him as an author, again, social psychologist, man of the left. It's a great book, but when you got one side that believes the other side is evil and thinks that hurting defenseless animals is great, or thinks that they're all racists, or they're all xenophobes, homophobes, all the other slanders. It's really hard to battle that. So I do think that if we continue down this path, we're going to see some very negative consequences from it.
Britton, are you up and running? Oh, he's having some comm issues, guys, so we might have to come back to him. All right, so I'm just going to explain my answer. So I said in the 10, 20 year time frame, most likely no. I do think there's some very deep divides, obviously, in the country. But I don't think we're at that point yet. Yeah, man, I know a lot of you guys are commenting in the comment section. I understand that stuff is going by so quick, you can't even read it. So if you're getting pissed off and nobody's responding on the panel about your comments, understand that stuff's going like 90 miles an hour right now. But so anyways, back on what I was saying, I don't think we are divided pretty severely, but we're not more than one election away from going from the pendulum swinging back to one way or the other. Guys, 2 years ago, there was a Republican president. All right. In another couple of years, we could have another Republican president. In 1 year, we could have a Republican Congress and Senate. All right. We have seen over the last several decades this go back and forth. Okay. So, it doesn't matter what side wins the election, because that other side that lost is going to say, oh, it was stolen, XYZ, right? When Donald Trump became the president, what did you hear from the left? Oh, the Russians interfered, and, that's why Donald Trump won, okay? And then when Donald Trump lost, oh, election fraud, okay? Now, there's arguments that can be made. I'm not discrediting election fraud. It does exist. If you think there's no such thing as election fraud, you live in a bubble. Or you live in a hole in the ground or something, okay? Does it exist to the point to where it's going to change the outcome of an election? That's debatable, okay? And I think if there was enough, then that evidence would be there overwhelmingly, okay? So do I think there's going to be a civil war in the next 10, 20 years? No. Do I think there could be one beyond that? Possibly, okay? And there could very well be one in that time frame outline. What I think is more possible is civil unrest, okay? You look at any state, and I think the good doc pointed this out in another live stream. Every state is divided. Even look in real blue states or real red states, you will notice that the percentages aren't what you think, right? You look at Texas, red state. It's only, 60% Republican? That's a lot of Democrats still left over, okay? But yet Texas is considered a solid red state. So I don't think a traditional civil war in the sense of like what we saw in the 1800s is even possible anymore, because we're sprinkled all over the country. All over the country, you have communities that are of different minds, okay? Your neighbor could be diametrically opposed to what you're saying, okay? Are you going to go next door and set your neighbor's house on fire? I don't think so. Okay, I don't think we're at that point yet. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to turn it over to the panel, and I want to throw this question out there. If a civil war, and I'm not saying civil war in the sense of like 1800 civil war, it could be anything. It could be civil unrest like we saw over the summer. If something devolves into armed conflict, what would that look like? Anybody pick this up?
I'll jump on the grenade. I think one of the things that's keeping the lid on right now is there's a lack of geographical center and or extra charismatic person. That combination would be the catalyst to start the fire. There's no geographical thing. You can't point to state X and say, well, state X is seceding and they're doing their own thing to start a movement. And there's no really charismatic person out there that's calling for active resistance of any type to the government. borderline on armed rebellion. Those two things together is the catalyst that would kick it off. Without those, I think the unrest that we're seeing will continue as long as there are police departments around the country that do not quell the unrest. It's going to continue. And the longer it continues, the harder authority will have to crack down when they finally decide it's time to do so.
I think that's an interesting point too, because I'm finishing up law school, and in constitutional law, you have a constitutional right under free speech to discuss what we're talking about, to say, you know what, I believe that sometimes civil unrest or violence is the only answer. However, you don't have a constitutional right to actively advocate for the overthrowing of the government and to get people to take direct action. So you cross a legal minefield there.
I feel like, are we kind of jumping the shark a little bit in terms of, like, shouldn't we be asking what steps can we take to prevent this from happening? So, Les, I think you said that you felt like it had already started. Like, do you think there's anything that we can do to remedy this when you were saying, like, both sides not talking to one another? Examples such as that.
Yeah, one of the things you see right now is if, say, the Republicans do something, there are those on the left or the Democratic side that will compare their actions to that of Nazis. It doesn't matter the subject. Well, we all grew up, we've all watched our war movies. What do we do when we see Nazis? We kill them. Of course, they're Nazis. That's what you do. Nazis are always evil. When you're comparing your own internal people to an evil that great, you're automatically starting to turn up the heat in the water. So you have to find ways of diffusing it. Some of the ways I think would be diffusing it would be if both political parties would start to call out their own extremists when they start to get out of hand. And they also have to stop voting in these blocks that, you see a vote come up in Congress right now, doesn't matter the subject, you'll see that vote go right down party lines, kind of much like the impeachment of Donald Trump, right down party lines. The current thing over Build Back Better, almost right down party lines with the exception of two people holding it up, and that matters only because the margins are so close. You look at a cable news show, you see the commentators, it doesn't matter which network, advocating for their side, and the person that comes on their show advocating for this side is almost berated by the host. There's nobody out there even asking for calm. There's nobody out there, even attempting to turn the flames down. We see stupid things like during the riots of mostly peaceful protests. I mean, it's a riot. A riot is a riot.
Hey, can I jump in there, Les? Because I want to talk to that point, and I would say that, yeah, you're right. I mean, when you're looking for common ground, you're looking for a common agreement or at least compromise, right? So you're saying, hey, let's find a common value. All right. So let me back up and say, before we get to a cure, because we're saying, your question is a great question, Brent. I want to get to it. What does the Civil War look like? And then Michael rightfully calls back and says, oh, hold on, can't we talk about cures before we, decide to all kill each other? But I say, let's go back one farther and say, how'd we get here? And, we could point to many different places. For me, and I wouldn't even argue that the other places are wrong. In my mind, in 1954, we have the Civil Rights Movement. That is, we'd had multiple world wars. We had Korean War. We saw the integration of the military come right out of Korea, 53. And in 54, these veterans returned home. And they said, look, damn it, I believe in this country. I fought for this country. My friends died for this country. Just because my skin is different color than you, just because I have a different faith than you, doesn't, whatever the case is, that doesn't mean I'm any less American. And so the Civil Rights Movement said, look, damn it, it's time to right a wrong that we knew existed prior to 1776. And it's written about extensively in our history, in newspapers, in open public dialogue, in political papers. We knew that it was wrong in 1776 not to include everybody. So in 1954, we have the civil rights movement that ends in 1964 with several major, several major findings and solutions like affirmative action and stuff like this. And even that affirmative action wasn't presented forward as when it was presented. There were many people who said it's imperfect. It's flipping, the fairness value. It's not a good solution, but it's the one we have. And so we're going to let this go from one generation, 64, and it was supposed to end in 84. Not to go down that rabbit hole. Here's my point. What we agreed on, why the civil rights movement wins by 1964, is we agree on equality, right? Let me define that. Think of it as a foot race. Equality is that we all get to line up. We have the same opportunity to line up at the starting line. Now, that's a figurative way to say it. Let me say it a different way. The public and government institutions of the United States of America, from drinking fountains and public buses all the way to your senator's telephone number, we have access, equal access. Equality, equal access to that, equal access to the courts and the legal systems and all the institutions in this wonderful country that we have faith in. And when I listen to you guys talk about it, you're saying, look, no veteran wants, we've seen this in other countries. We don't want this. I'm on board with that. I don't ever want to see war in my land because I've seen it in 2 other countries. Actually, I've seen it in 3, and I don't want to see it. So, okay, got it. We don't want that, but we do have faith in our system. I just heard Brent, speaking beautifully about, don't worry, guys. What temperance, what wonderful things he said. He said, look, so we have a Democrat president now. There'll be a Republican next time. Yeah, that's wonderful because you're expressing. And he says, yeah, maybe there is some corruption in the voting system, but we should all still have faith in those institutions. And that's what it was all about. From 54 to 64, we have faith in the institutions. We just have to correct the system. That is not today what has been discussed for the last 10 years. We are not discussing equality and faith in institutions. We are discussing equity. Equity. And equity is not, we all start at the same foot race at the start line. That's not what equity is. Let's get this clear. It doesn't matter where you start the race. We all finish the race at the finish line together. And the only way you can have equity is that you must violate the fairness, the access to those public and government institutions. You cannot have equal opportunity in order to have equal outcome. And so equity is a violation of those institutions. We no longer have faith in them. And that's where we are today. So we want to talk about, is there going to be a war? How do we solve this? Okay, but that's what we're looking at solving, is equity, not equality. Equality good, equity, Marxism. I mean, those are words, right? Just words. The point is that with equity, it violates the very principles of fairness of institutions. That's my point.
Doc, if I may, I'm a little bit confused on what you're saying there. So you said a lot, and I appreciate that. And there's a lot there, and I was trying to keep up with what you're saying. So in terms of, so you said in terms of for you in 1954, which started, the start of the civil rights movement was going on, and then the passage of like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Are you, just so I'm clear, are you saying like that was bad legislation at its core? Okay, good legislation. So where's the 54 part? That's where I'm just not clear on. That's where I wanted to gain some.
No, it's a great question. Thank you, Michael. And the point is that in 54, I'd say there was they call it tipping points. There was enough Americans who came and said, look, guys, we've always known this is bullshit. We've always known for 200 years that we didn't do right by the Mexicans, by the Indians, by the blacks, by the gays, by the women, by the, we didn't do right. We're supposed to be freedom and a republic. And so in 54, we owned up to it. And by 64, 65, we have, like you said, we have laws passed, we have affirmative action passed. We say, we're going to do right by the people who've been oppressed for 200 years in this country, because it was BS. And so this is wonderful legislation, fairness, equality, and that means equal access to public and government institutions, which means equal chance of success. So this is a wonderful thing, because with equality, what remains intact is our faith in the system and in the institutions. With equity, that's violated. Our faith in this system, because the system, in order for us all, we're not equal. We're never going to be equal. We were born with different, you're faster than me. I'm way better looking than you. Women love me, so I'm going to get more girlfriends than you. Whatever it is.
Shut him down. He's really talking crazy now. Yeah. Man's out of his mind, Brent. I don't even know why I have him on here. He's barely, come on.
No, you know what I'm saying. So my point is, with equity, we're saying, no, we all have to have the exact same number of girlfriends. Literally, we're saying this. We have to have the exact same experiences. We have to have the exact same money. We have to have the exact same size house. And when you do that, there's only one way to do that for all of us, and that's to violate the fairness principles of our institutions, and we lose faith.
Yeah, I don't know who's advocating for that. I don't. But,
I
yeah,
mean,
no,
that's an interesting thought, and I think also one of the problems, and this is where I can already feel the comments section about to come alive. Like, people are under the impression that we had the civil rights movement of the 60s and everything's all good now. Like, that's just, I don't know anybody who thinks the government, oh, there's an issue, the government did this one thing, we're good. They got it. They nailed it. Like, the reality is either 2009 or 2007, there was the Truth in Sentencing Act. You had a gram of crack cocaine. You had a gram of regular cocaine. Much different sentences. The white guys with the regular gram of cocaine were going on their way, and people with the gram of crack are getting life sentences for distribution. Like, there are fundamental issues with equality in America still, the way that policing's done. The problem here, I'm not even going to look at the comments. I can already, you fucking libtard. The problem here is that the communication on both sides. The left has no idea how to actually put a policy that makes a change that they want to bring about. They're really good at just coming up with the craziest shit on earth that will not do anything to help anybody ever. The right, there's also over there, there's some, the far right and the far left are just like these polar extremes where it's hard to find that common ground. But you have to understand there are issues with justice in America. Did BLM take that shit too far? Are they like on the fringes of being an extremist group themselves? Yeah, probably. Like, it's gotten out of hand. Doesn't mean there's not an issue. Is the right, like some of these alt-right QAnon people, gone off the hinges? Yeah, probably, but also doesn't mean that, there aren't some issues that their freedoms are being stripped away, that they have a right to come, and it's being able to find, that's where we need to find that middle ground. The right, far right needs to ease up a little bit, and the far left needs to realize everything, we're different. Not everything is going to be equal. I would love, this communism utopia that everybody wants and everything's free and it's just not the way it's going to be. You have to have the opportunities that you're saying, the equal opportunities and stuff. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there are economic problems. When the money from your housing and from your neighborhoods goes to pay for the schools, people in lower income areas are going to have shittier schools than people in higher income areas. And that's not exactly equal and having that same playing field. But I'm not suggesting we push over to socialism. People just need to give and take a little bit and understand both sides, no matter how extreme they are, in somewhere based in there, there's a valid, grounded argument that you need. That's like the first thing to getting someone to calm down. Like they teach you that in like couples counseling and shit. You're like, I hear what you're saying. You're mad at me because I don't take the trash out, but like you need to at least acknowledge what the fuck the other side's saying, and then you can be able to move forward from there.
Hey, can I say something real quick? I was dead wrong, guys. I said there wasn't going to be a civil war in the next 10, 20 years. I'm looking at the comment section. There's a civil war going on. That's all I want to say.
I tell you, anybody that came here, I saw some guys that were like, I'm out. I can't believe the comment section. If you're here for the comment section, you're here for the wrong reason anyway. All right. I mean, the comment section is a very diverse group of opinions that's pretty wild out there for sure. I go back and look through them after the stream and I'm like, oh, wow, man, this is crazy. We give our commenters certainly a pretty darn wide berth. Trust me, it does get shut down sometimes, but a pretty darn wide berth as long as it's on topic. And I think that's exactly what we're doing with the panel here today. Michael, you brought up a good point where you said, hey, how do we sort of prevent this? Well, this panel right here is how we start to prevent it, is we get together as Americans with a diverse group of opinions. We bring some people in with opinions that differ from ours. We discuss it out, and we find out that these differences that we have are certainly not worth taking up arms about. It's not even worth going to fist blows over. We can sit down and have a whiskey and a beer, and we can rub Micah's beard, and we can make it all okay. You know, like we can realize that these differences are not that huge of a deal between us to get all upset about. I think, I know it's a diverse group of opinions here, and a diverse group of people. All you have to do is have a look at the panel and you see that. And those of you that have been here for a while, you know that this may be how you sort of de-escalate things. I think that one of the biggest problems that we all have, right and left, is that those who tend to speak for us are more of the vocal minority rather than the representative average person that chooses either side. And when you look at the representative average person that actually chooses either side, your leftist neighbor, your right-wing neighbor, whatever the case may be, there's not giant differences between them and you. And the things that are most important to them are probably shared with you as well. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be right. It boils down every topic, every debate, every discussion. I mean, everybody just wants to be right. Nobody wants to listen and talk anymore. I mean, you can't have this type of conversation we're having with people with an opposing view most of the time. At least where I live, Everybody they have their answers already memorized in their head, or they know what they're gonna say. They'll even initiate the conversation because they just want to be right, And it's just stupid. It's a waste of time.
Well,
I don't think any of us are extremists, though, and I think that's why we're able to have this conversation. I personally make the distinction between a liberal and a leftist, and a leftist is a Marxist. A liberal is somebody who disagrees with me, but will hear my side of the argument. So I don't think we have any extremists here. I don't think we have any fascists here, or communist or anything. At least maybe in the chat, but not on this panel. So I think we're able to have this conversation, and I think you're right, Bruce. I think that the fact that we're having this conversation and nobody's losing their freaking marbles. Michael asked on chat, can you ask everybody if they want a civil war? No, I don't want a civil war. God, no. We had one already. That's enough. Enough American lives lost over that. We need to find any way possible to avoid it, and this is a good start. So yeah, kudos on you, Bruce. That's a good point.
Yeah. I was going to say, also echo on Micah and Bruce and Chad. The thing that happens is that these words, liberal, conservative, left, right, they become these buzzwords, right? And as soon as it goes on the air, then like Santiago, like you said, opinions already formed, this and that. And in the book that Chad mentioned, which I've also have, what it talks about is sort of like values and definitions, right? Because a person on the right who hears the word left has maybe a set of definitions attributed to that versus someone on the left and what they define that as. And of course, if we're not talking about rather what left means, just talking about our values as to like what we want for this country, what we want to see for our children, right? Everyone can relate to like family and what you want. I have many conversations with a lot of my neighbors who have opposing viewpoints, and we just sit on the porch having bourbon, and we just kind of just talk about shit, and it's fine. It's never gotten to yelling or anything like that, and it's great that way. And I think part of the reason as to like why maybe now feels more volatile than maybe it did before in the 60s is that at least in the 60s, and I could argue that maybe the 60s. I mean, you had some political assassinations going on. Thank goodness that hasn't happened yet, or hopefully not. But the one thing that you could say is that from a news source perspective, that you just had your core NBC, CBS, ABC, and so as Americans watching television, we all saw that, whether you're left or right. So what that helped in a certain aspect is that we all had the same information source, so that when we did talk, there was that same type of thing. Whereas now, you can go into whatever news source you want that caters specifically to your viewpoint that you want to hear, and that's it. And you're just stuck in that. And so then talking to anyone else that has their own echo chamber, which we've heard that term before, right? It makes that conversation that much more difficult to have.
I agree. Everyone should challenge themselves to read multiple sources. Somebody pointed out to me, and it was uncomfortable at first, but when you read a story, why don't you try and find it on Al Jazeera and say, read the story from an Al Jazeera standpoint, because they're going to have a different look on it. You want to read the CNN article, then read the Fox News article on the exact same topic. See how both sides, because you're right. It's being presented. People are in their echo chambers. We don't like to be uncomfortable. We like things the way they are. We don't want to get out of our comfort zones. And the reality is that this is a pretty diverse country we live in with a whole lot of views. And when I think of extreme left, you think of like San Francisco. You think of some of the crazy alt-left policies, but then at the same time, the right and the southern Midwestern states, they put out equally, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the Texas abortion. Like, it's a direct shot in the face of what the Supreme Court has said. And like, that's a dangerous precedent to set when we're not following the rules and the systems and the programs that we have in place. That gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Micah, and I agree completely in your assessment of looking at what's going on out there in the news. I do the same thing. People might not realize this, but I probably spend more time watching CNN and MSNBC and looking at Yahoo News than I do watching, say, Fox or Breitbart or Drudge, because I've formed my opinions and I know where I stand on things. I don't need a lot of reaffirmation of how I believe on controversial topics. For example, abortion. That's a great controversial topic. It's been the one of my lifetime that has never went away. But but I want to see what other people are thinking. I want to see how are they formulating their arguments. And if you're just saying, oh, they're just stupid, half of America is just stupid, and you dismiss it as simple as that, I don't think you're really sizing up the other side of the country or other people's views accurately. I think that's a very naive thing to do. I know that I learned as a very young man. My grandfather was a Normandy vet, and when he went into England to train, they basically told him the Germans are stupid and they're inferior, and we're going to go over there and we're going to wipe their butts. And he realized really quick when he was pinned down in a ditch outside of a group of shrubs that were planted there, and the Germans had a tank on one end and a squad of soldiers on the other end that kept them pinned down for days. And then the tanks decided to leave, and all of a sudden they were no longer pinned down, and realized that his entire unit had been pinned down by about a dozen guys, that they weren't stupid. And he needed to pay a little more attention to what they were doing and not necessarily what people were telling him they were all about. And that stuck with me my whole life. And I think that's true today. I can sit across from any, we'll say liberal, leftist, whatever you want to call them, anybody whose views are on the other side than mine. And most of them I can find some common ground with. They're intelligent people. They formulated their beliefs for some reason based on their life experiences, and they feel passionately about how they feel. But they're not just stupid people. And I want you to learn how they feel, why they feel, how Americans are digesting the news, where they're getting their news from, what's important to them. I like to clown on Yahoo News all the time, and I like to talk about, that's where you go and find out who the Kardashians are sleeping with. That's a huge portion of America. And that portion of America, they get their news there, and they believe what they hear is true. And they're just not well informed, but that's where they're getting their news. And their vote, and should there, God forbid, be a civil war, their rifle bullet has the exact same value as yours. And you need to respect that.
Oh, okay, so let me call myself to the mat on that, because whoever said it, whether it was Micah or Michael or any of the other mics that are in this room, what were there, like 7 mics in this room? Whichever Michael said it, I'm guilty as charged. That I way too often, because you're right, it's a creature comfort thing. There's confirmation bias going on, and I tend to want to hear information that confirms my bias. Do I go out to Al Jazeera? Do I read The Independent? Yeah. By the way, I consider I consider Fox News the same way. I'm reading what the enemy has to say. But, even that's a confirmation bias, because that's really what I'm doing. Why am I reading The Independent, Fox News, and Al Jazeera? Because I'm expecting to read things that I disagree with, right? I gird my loins and I say, yeah, I don't agree with these bastards. And then I read it, right? So I'm not doing it with the clearest head. It's not really the most intellectual pursuit. And I'm going to call myself to the mat there. But this is an interesting segue that Bruce was making, one of the few people in this panel that isn't called Michael, that Bruce was making, because he was saying, look, we convince ourselves that the other side, anybody that doesn't agree with me is stupid. They're intellectually inferior. You know why I'm doing that? Because it's the very, very first part of the Civil War. It is to make people less than me. And then, once I've established them as somehow inferior to me, then I strip away their humanity. Now, I'm going to go somewhere really uncomfortable, okay? I strip away their humanity, and you guys saw this. Oh, yeah, that's what the Americans were doing to, the black slaves. We stripped away their humanity, even though there were plenty of voices, in religion, in politics, in social discussion, saying, hey, guys, this ain't right. This ain't right. But we did it, and we did it, and we did it, and we justified it because we convinced ourselves, yeah, but they're less than human, all right? So we did this with homosexuals. We've done this with one group after another, and that's what the civil rights was. It was like, stop doing this. Fine. Now it's going to get real uncomfortable in the room. We've convinced ourselves that human fetuses are not humans. They're less than human. And when you think about that, think about how we protect something like animals, right? We have animal rights. What's often thrown up as a conversation piece is like the prison time and the fines for destroying an eagle, a bald eagle egg. Why? Because we know what a bald eagle egg becomes. Under ideal conditions, it becomes a bald eagle. We know what a human fetus becomes. I don't care whether you say it's human or not. You know what it becomes. And so the way I'm going to have abortion, and the way I'm going to make sure that I can terminate that life of a human fetus, it is by scientific and medical terms, it's life. I'm not calling it human. I'm saying it's life. It defines as life, and it's a human fetus. And so all I have to do, and I'm using this as an example because we could do this with, forget human fetus. You don't want to talk about that one? Let's talk about Muslims. All I have to do is convince you that Muslims don't have a right to live, that they're inferior to you. This is how the Civil War starts.
I don't know if you remember 2003, 2004. That's essentially what happened. Like, you know, we were scooping mud. There's a story I read. This guy sat in Gitmo for years, like a decade, and he finally won his right to sue in the Supreme Court and got his freedom. We snatched him up out of Pakistan and like kept him in Gitmo for all these. Like, you're absolutely right. And I probably shouldn't have opened the abortion bag. Here's the only point I wanted to make on that, and I've already seen the comments. I came for the comments. I don't care. That's exactly why I came, to help my buddy out with this podcast. There's one I want to know. Micah will say anything for a bowl of rice. I don't even know what the fuck that means, but that's my favorite comment so far. I will say anything for a bowl of rice. I'm assuming that's like a Chinese slay or something like that. So anyway, with abortion, why it came up in my mind. I love it. Since I've had a year of constitutional law, my favorite thing is watching my Facebook feed, and everybody's like, oh, it's unconstitutional. I've already seen people like, oh, this guy's going to be a lawyer, doesn't know the Constitution. I don't know it. You're right. Perfect. So anyway, there's a series of cases that have come down over the time. The government has passed laws preventing married couples from using birth control. The government has sterilized Native Americans and people that thought were feeble-minded. Come to find out years later that they were not feeble-minded. We just sterilized some people, and the Supreme Court's exact words were 3 generations of morons is enough. Enough is enough. And like that's like a quote from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court giving that opinion. Over the years, case law has established that one of those fundamental rights that we actually do have, when you want to talk about unconstitutional, is family planning. Americans have a right to decide when and where they're going to plan a family. Education is a fundamental right. Americans have to decide how they want their children, whether in private school, public schools. These are fundamental rights. And the article I read was from the Chief Justice, who is a Catholic Bush appointee, who said, we're going to have some, okay, so let's say the Texas law stands. Everybody's good. So now someone's like, and it starts, what you were saying with dehumanizing people, it starts. And let me give you an example in the law field. We don't give a shit about pedophiles, and nobody's losing any sleep over it. The Kyle Rittenhouse trial we just had, remember when the judge chewed that guy's ass? That was because pre-trial, there was something that was supposed to be excluded because it was very prejudicial. It's called propensity evidence. There's all these rules about keeping that shit out. Nope, not with sex offenders. Like, I feel like even in California, if you steal a candy bar, they can introduce the fact that you're a sex offender. Like, it just is what it is. That's coming in. No one cares. So it starts there. We pass a law, Roe versus Wade, family planning's not so much a fundamental right. Now we're like, you know what we should do? We should cut the balls off sex offenders. No one's going to know. Okay, they're less than human. Who gives a fuck? Let's do it. Now we start expanding it a little more. You know who else is bad people? Killers. Killers are really bad people. We should start clipping their nuts so they don't get to reproduce. And that snowball keeps on rolling. He's just like, we have over the years established some things as fundamental rights to what we have. And I'm telling you right now, family planning is a fundamental right. And that's pre-viability. Now, New York and other states are like, stabbing late trimester abortions. Like, no, you're right. That's a fetus. That's going to turn into once it can survive outside the womb. But in those initial stages, like, the government is just repugnant. They want to tell people if they can use birth control in the bedroom, unchecked. They want to tell you, we don't think you should reproduce, unchecked. They want to tell this woman, I don't care if you're 19 or whatever and made some terrible decisions in college and you're only 6 weeks into your pregnancy, you're having this thing. Like, there's fundamental rights that we cannot run afoul of, and we have to understand and respect. And I get the religious argument. I know there's a lot of people that genuinely in their heart of hearts believe that once, an embryo, once the sperm fertilizes the egg, once you can detect a heartbeat, that life has begun. And I understand that. One of the aspects of abortion law that no one talks about is the government is actually allowed, using their money, to express a preference. They can actually say, we'll fund women that take their baby to full term, but won't fund abortions. And that's legal. They can do that. So why aren't more states using the carrot instead of the stick? Why has the government ever tried not using the stick?
It's a good question, Micah. And I mean, let me chime in here because it's something that strangely Bruce follows. Not that I feel that strongly about, but I do think it's a great example in our country in my lifetime. I said this before, of a very divisive, controversial topic that separates us politically, it separates us religiously, it separates us in some cases by the sexes. And here we are, a full-grown male panel. And I bet most of us have kids telling the world our opinion on abortion, but I'll do it nonetheless because I'm not afraid to go there. Maybe we can make the same argument for all the other things that are controversial. So maybe that's the common ground. Maybe that's what we're solving here. But I'll say this: there's two problems with the current abortion law, Roe versus Wade. The number one problem, and the Supreme Court has said this time and time again, is if you want to freaking do something, you run it through Congress. Don't make us make that decision. That's the real problem. Okay, that's the real problem. It should have been ran through Congress. Congress can today get together. Look, they can't make a law on how to split a candy bar today, but they could, in theory, settle this thing right now today if they wanted to. The fact is they can't, and they can't because the country can't. Therefore, they kick the can into the Supreme Court, and they put those poor judges, whoever they are, at whatever point in time, in this situation for making this decision in terms of women's health, for Christians, for all the different groups that have a stake in the matter or an opinion in the matter. Secondly, the second point is this. This is 100% fully based on the age of the child / fetus. Call it whatever you want, doesn't matter. The argument isn't whether abortion should be illegal or not. The argument is, and today is, can a state decide at what point a person is a person? Because we have different laws that contradict that. On the one hand, we have laws that say right now at 25 weeks, if you want to have an abortion, that's considered constitutional. On the other hand, at 25 weeks, if some gangbanger shoots you in the stomach and your baby dies, he can get charged for killing that child. They're at odds there, right? We haven't agreed on that yet. And so what the states are simply doing now, Texas being one of them, is they're going in and they're saying, well, we believe that the age of viability, and this is the other problem with the argument, is that those pro-abortionists have argued from back in probably the 70s, if not the 80s, that the point in which a child can become a child is when it can be removed from the womb and it can survive. That's viability. Medical technology tells you that kids are getting younger and younger. I have a family with a lot of preemies that are earlier than that age that grew up to be great young men and women. So no, that's not working either, right? Like that age is getting younger and younger. Eventually you're going to be able to take an egg and a sperm and stick them together, put them in a petri dish and raise that kid outside of the womb to be a great, outstanding American like Doc Larson. The problem with that is then viability goes away. And now in the Supreme Court today, you have even those that are representing the side of abortion. They're saying, look, we just have to agree on a time for viability. It's always been 26 weeks, and don't quote me on that, maybe some, but it's always been this date. We don't want to change it now. But the problem is when states come in and go, viability has changed due to medical technology. Is it now the point of a heartbeat? Is it 16 weeks? Is it 25 and a half weeks? What is it? And that becomes complicated for one other reason. And I don't want to get too far into abortion, but I think it's a good discussion, is this.
All right, yeah. Wait, I'm jumping in here, guys, because I'm calling a ceasefire. That's not the topic.
It's not the topic, but it is though. The differences in the country that can lead to a civil war.
It is the topic if you think about it, because you're asking, how are we going to get to a civil war? This is where it happens. Right. Is it abortion? Is it mask mandates? Is it taking guns away? These are the legislations. It's the slavery that
No, this is good. This is why I brought these guys on. But that's what I want to get at. I don't think abortion is the trigger. Okay, I don't think that's the flashpoint. Now, I understand it's a hot topic. I understand that people have very very straight arrow like sides. It's kind of like one or the other. I don't think that's the flashpoint, though. Let me tell you what is. Gun control, overreach of federal government on firearms. I think that is a flashpoint. And that is one that is very, very realistic, because that is one that there is no giving ground. If you're on my side of the political spectrum, I say we're done. We gave up the ability to have fully automatic weapons, essentially, unless you pay $200 tax stamp, and they're almost priced out of reach, right? A young man cannot afford a fully automatic machine gun anymore. He doesn't have 20, 30,000 sitting around to spend on that because the federal government has regulated them out of reach. Okay. We have given up so much, and guys like me say no more. We aren't tolerating this. That is your trigger point. I think there's, and let's be honest. There's nothing in the Bill of Rights about abortion. There is something in the Bill of Rights about the right to bear arms. So let me throw this over to UT, because you're jumping in, and I know Micah wants to jump in here, because as soon as I said there's nothing in the Bill of Rights about abortion, he's going, real quick. UT, jump in the fight, man.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you, brother.
Okay. So just to start off again with your main topic, what's going to start a civil war? I do agree with Brent. That is definitely with the whole gun control issue. The government overreach is definitely a start of it. Also, what did I want to say? The economic issues, right? Where prices go up, supply goes down, that kind of stuff is what hurts us as civilians and consumers. When that stuff really kicks in really hard, that is when I believe that's when people will start acting, let's just be honest, like animals, right? I've been through 2 riots, right, in LA, Los Angeles, the gosh, can't even think of their names right now. LAPD, all that stuff, right? You guys remember that stuff. I've been through that. And then I've been through the Northridge earthquake and seeing society break down. I've seen it firsthand. There's a point, like, people are going to do whatever they want to do to survive. And it doesn't really matter what side you're on, because in the nice neighborhoods, I was living in one of the poor neighborhoods, and the people in the better neighborhoods, 5, 6, 7 miles up from me, they stayed together. They combined their efforts and stuck together. And then that's what I think. That's what you're going to see if there's any type of clash amongst society. People will stay into these groups, right, depending on their neighborhood. And some people in the bad neighborhoods will have to probably fend for themselves because they don't want to get involved, and they'll get hurt. They'll be preyed upon, and that's I've seen it. And again, when there's a supply and demand, nothing can be. People can't get their food, gasoline. Those are really big issues with people. Right. I mean, we could talk about all the government, all these laws and everything, but it comes down to what's in our pocket, our bank account, and what can I get with it? How can I feed my family? How can I keep this roof over my head? Right. I think those are the really pressing issues as we as a society have to face and have to figure out, because when all that stuff breaks down, no more supply, demand, it's all gone. People are going to turn into animals. Right. That's just how I look at it, because I've seen it.
Britton, you got calm, man? Been trying to get you for like an hour. Are you up and running, brother?
Hey, is it on?
Yeah, we got you. Can you hear me? Oh, I think he's got comm issues still. Damn it. All right, Micah, go ahead, man. I know you're like jumping at the limb here.
Oh, the gun. You and I are on the same page with guns, man. That's how I started. I was like, I follow this David Hogg kid who's the worst. He is like he's like, oh, it's just, if you just I don't want to give him any more attention. But if you're one of those people that want to take a look at a car accident, go to David Hogg's Twitter feed and just see the garbage that spills out of his mouth. Like, the Bill of Rights. We have enumerated right to weapons, like you said, the Second Amendment. My favorite constitutional amendment that I've recently fully understand is the Ninth Amendment. The Ninth Amendment says that nothing that we've said, they knew they weren't going to be able to figure out all of our fundamental rights, all of our Bill of Rights, everything that was in there. So they came up with the first 10. We got that. But 9 says just because we didn't write it down doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so over time, you know, it doesn't say in the Constitution you have a right to privacy, but the 4th Amendment, the 5th, some of the other, the 6th Amendment, it's been interpreted as to, hey, you have a right to privacy in your home, in your possessions, between you and your lawyer. Like there's a privacy right that you have, that society expects. So that's what I was getting at. It doesn't say you have the right to an abortion, but we've determined that fundamental rights as family planning is, education is. And yeah, it's not going to be the tipping point. Guns is a tricky subject for me. And this is one of those ones where, yeah, I'm a big 2A guy. I literally just got home from shooting. I went shooting I live in the desert. It's beautiful this time of year. I literally just got home from shooting. It was amazing. Here's the issue that I have, that it's hard to get right-wing people on with this. Yes, we have a fundamental right to own weapons and protect ourselves. We also need to acknowledge the fact that at the time that was written, guns were commonplace in all the homes and everyone had a basic working familiar knowledge with guns. That is not the case today. People are just foolish. Should I think there should be some sort of testing, licensing sort of requirement? Like maybe, like someone was in the comments, I bet he doesn't think you should have an AR. You should have an AR-15. You should absolutely be able to have an AR-15. California has these goofy AR-15s that are just stupid. You should be able to have an AR-15. However, pause for effect. Does the guy who just bought that AR-15 in his apartment complex in Los Angeles or Orange County or something like that think he's going to use that for home defense with 300 other residents in there? Like, he needs to have some common sense and some understanding about the range, the caliber, the type. These are things that were more familiar back in the day. And I just would be concerned about a free-for-all system that allows every moron to get any kind of weapon they want. Bottom line, end of story. Now I hear you, Brent. Like you're like they taxed us out of fully auto. This bullshit. Like, so this is where McBride and I had some conversations on post. Should you be able to have an AT-4 rocket in your home for defense?
Yes,
Brent.
you should. You're goddamn right. You should.
Well,
Micah. Oh,
let me ask Micah. Let me ask Micah this. Do you agree? What's your opinion? Do you feel that would be termed a racist test to require that for one to exercise their rights, whichever right it is, to show some type of proficiency, knowledge, and understanding in that right? Because the same has been proposed for voting. And it's always immediately shut down as it's keeping less educated, those that have see where I'm going with this? Those that have less means.
You're talking about the poll tax, and that's an interesting point. You can't
those that are less literacy. Those from the schools that have the poorer teachers. It's this little slippery slope, isn't it? I don't completely disagree with you. I'll tell anyone here, if you want to own a firearm, you need to go get trained and be proficient with that firearm. I don't want to see anybody's kids get hurt. I don't want to see anybody go to court over a shooting that's not a nice, clean shooting. And a lot of these can be avoided if people simply have a little bit of education on what's allowable in their state for use of force and a few basic safety rules around children. One of my biggest fears when my daughter was growing up was not that she would get a hold of one of my firearms, but that she would be in somebody else's house and they would have dad's firearm that was under the pillow or between the mattress, whatever the case would be. But so I'm not completely, I believe in smart parenting and having everyone proficient with the firearms that they have, not just to be safe, but so that in a time that it's necessary, as permitted by the Second Amendment, they can employ those firearms and slay bodies efficiently. But that's not something that I'm sure would fly in the constitutional side of things. And Micah being a constitutional guy, a scholar in that thing, I just thought I would just throw that right back at him.
No, man, the extent we get in law is that, and that was the interesting thing, is that it was recently So this is the 14th Amendment makes it so that the first 10 amendments apply to the states as well. So it's a little tidbit, but it wasn't until again, it was like 2008 was the first time the Supreme Court said, and it was McDonald v. Chicago, DC versus Heller combined cases, where the courts, the first time they said you have the right to own a firearm in your house independent of a militia for self-defense. And that was like 2008. So the Second Amendment's been around for a long time, but it wasn't until very recently that the court said you have that right. And now we have to take a look at what's happening in New York. You know, you should be able to take that gun out of your home to go to the range, no problem. And there's going to be a series, but I get what you're saying. And so I don't know how that relates to a poll tax. That's a very good point. But they've obviously found a way to regulate it, and banning machine guns has been found to be constitutional, you know?
Okay, so this is where I chime in and I say this is where I have never found the Republicans or the Democrats represent me. And just as somebody else said, just as Michael was saying, hey, we're just throwing out words, progressive, communist, conservative, and even just words like Republican and Democrat. What the hell does that mean? So let me be more clear. What I mean is this. I'm not comfortable. Let me be honest with you. I'm not comfortable with all humans having human rights. I'll follow it up. Hear me out. I'm not comfortable with all humans having human rights when I see so many humans that are absolutely irresponsible and reckless and dangerous with their human rights. And I mean that sincerely. And it grates me. So let me give you just one that we've all been talking about, but it's only one of many human rights. I see people with firearms that I think, as a warrior, as an Army infantry veteran, NCO, I'm like, Jesus Christ Almighty, you should never even be allowed to touch a BB gun. But the fact is that there are many human rights, and I won't go farther than that because I'll offend people. There are many human rights that I'm going, damn, I don't want you to have. Micah, you make an excellent point. Here's the thing. Let me go back to a hot topic issue. Is the problem with me not wanting everyone to have human rights is that I have to describe people. I have to start defining people who are less human, right? Less deserving anyway. And so now let's go back to that abortion. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm anti-abortion. Let me say it again. You didn't hear wrong. I'm not pro-life. I'm not pro-life. I'm anti-abortion. I see it as murder, and it's horrible. It's horrific, and I think it's the biggest genocide we've ever experienced as a human being. So I'm against Roe versus Wade. Of course I am. I'm Roman Catholic. I want the law changed, and I want this all shut down. No, I don't. Micah, you hit the nail on the head. People have the human right to procreation. That is, to select it. Now, I hope, because I'm not comfortable recognizing other human beings' rights. And they're having rights. I'm like, well, then, don't have sex or have responsible sex, right? Don't get pregnant. Don't kill the kid because you're an idiot with rights. But the reality is that's human. The reality is I have to accept that their right to procreation means there's going to have a right to abortion. So here's how I solve that. And it's not easy. It's so simple. No, it isn't. I sit down with my daughters at my kitchen table and I tell them, your children will be loved. I don't care where they come from. I don't care if it's an accident for you. My grandchildren are born into love, and there will be no killing of the Larsons. We will have birth, and we will love that child. I can only improve the land where I stand on it. And I'm not comfortable with all people having human rights. But since I want them to respect mine, I'm going to respect the fact that they vote, and I don't want them to. I'm going to respect the fact that they have an AT4 in their garage, and I don't want them to. But I don't know a veteran yet that doesn't want every swinging dick that has a firearm. You got a trigger, you better have trained on it.
I have a question. Doc, you brought up something interesting. Has everyone on the panel seen the movie LA Confidential? Great movie. No. All right. Actually, Bruce, can you put, or Brant, can you put it back to where I can see everyone's faces? Thank you. Appreciate it. So yeah, that beautiful mug, Doc. Yeah, I gotta see that one right there. But the question I have for the panel is, because you're talking about human rights versus like some humans who don't abide by the human rights, right? So, question for the panel is: all right, American citizen, right, has available to them all the protections afforded to them under the law. Does anyone here agree that if an American citizen performs or does such a heinous act, such a heinous crime, that those laws no longer apply? Are there any scenarios where that happens?
Well, we've had those scenarios, haven't we? We've had those. I mean, if you're a criminal, if you've been convicted of certain things, then certain rights go away, such as voting, right? I mean, we've agreed to that. If you the ugly topic, if you're a pedophile, guess what? You don't get to live around a school. So yeah, some of those we've already accepted, haven't we?
Yeah, Bruce, that's a good point. You could
What
make an
was your
argument as
question
to like,
again? Can you say your question again?
yeah. So the question, and I'll actually characterize it a little bit further, because what I was more specifically referring to was like due process. But essentially is like, is there any crimes that an American citizen can commit that is so heinous that essentially they are not afforded due process under the law?
Well, there's the philosophical argument that everyone has a right to life, but once you try to deprive someone else of their right to life, you forfeit your right to life, and that's the nature of self-defense. So if someone's trying to take your life, you have the right. They have forfeited their right to life by trying to take your life, and as such have given you permission. It's permissible. It's justified in killing them.
America.
Yeah, there's no due process if you get shot in the face robbing a 7-Eleven.
Yeah,
Someone's
you guys are taking it
that
way
away.
more than what I meant. Jeez. No, all right. So, for example, there's a gentleman. He's seldom talked about, or he's even mentioned, but during the mid 2000s, his name was Jose Padilla. He's a U.S. citizen, and again, what I'm talking about here for the chat is that I'm not advocating for what this guy did. All right, let me be clear about that. But essentially, he tried to explode a dirty bomb in Chicago, if memory serves, right? Feds caught him, all right, and he's an American citizen, but under the Patriot Act, or just whatever they wanted to do, he was not provided an attorney, and he was in prison. I want to say for almost like 4 years. It was like they basically had to do a habeas corpus case to like get him, just to be able to like see an attorney and then get before a judge on charges. And so this was an instance where, he's an American citizen. Granted, heinous crime, right? Or attempt at crime. No, he was guilty, but this was an instance where the law book was thrown aside. And I remember during that time, reading various papers, news outlets, this and that, is like, well, hey, this guy, he's affiliated with Al Qaeda and this and that. And in my opinion, I say, well, it doesn't matter whether or not he's, affiliated with a terrorist group or not. If he's an American citizen, now you can make an argument for non-U.S. citizens and what rights they have under the law, whether they're captured inside the United States or outside. That's another argument. But for me, an American citizen not afforded the rights under the law is a huge catalyst. The reason that I mentioned this is a larger topic as what would be a catalyst for the Civil War, and that being that the institutions that were founded on, the Constitution that we're founded on, isn't followed.
Yeah. Okay, Michael. I'm going to jump right in there and say, thank you for bringing that up. That's an excellent point. So clearly, I'm going to fall on this. What I think you're leaning towards. I'm going to say that's egregious. That's just inherently wrong. And the reason I say that is, once again, why did we treat this man the way we did? We convinced ourselves that well, he's associated with Al Qaeda, so therefore, or ISIS, or whoever the hell it is, the soup du jour. So he's not really human. He's subhuman, and we don't owe him human rights. We don't owe him any kind of dignity. And this is how, oh my God. Yeah. Going back to 1954, right? This is the problem. This is how the Civil War starts, is when we convince ourselves that the other people aren't human and don't deserve human rights and human dignity. I mean, look, maybe we're not all religious. That's fine. I'm just saying, if you are, then humans are made from God, even Jeffrey Dahmer, and he ate people. Okay? And yet we still gave him due process. He ate people. Jesus Christ. Yeah.
I just want to step in on that and just tell everyone to read the Fifth Amendment again, because the Fifth Amendment says no person. It doesn't say anything about a citizen. Citizens in a civil action, of who can bring a civil action and sue the government, but for due process reasons, no person shall be deprived of due process. And that's exactly how the gentleman I was talking about earlier, who we scooped up out of Pakistan and kept in Gitmo for 10 years, finally got to the Supreme Court, because the Fifth Amendment says no person shall be held. And yeah, as repugnant as they are, it makes us no better. It makes us no better if we don't give them the opportunity to at least be heard before we cut their head off. And I do believe in the death penalty.
I think we
And
may
look
have
at
found
this,
out-
guys. Catalyst for civil war, as we were talking about here. You have George Floyd, who was arguably said was going to die that day anyways from a fentanyl overdose, regardless of the interaction of the police, depending on what you want to believe. On the other hand, you have Ashley Babbitt, killed for crawling through a window in the Capitol, and no one seems to care. One got riots that lasted for weeks, destroyed monuments across this country, basically upended us for an entire summer. And another one, who cares? That's what's going to be a catalyst right there, when one side is getting a benefit from the law and the other one is not even considered by the law.
And
Yeah, there is a double standard there.
My goal is being a public defender, and I hate cops. I mean, I'm not defund the police. I think there's a lot of work to be done with the police in America. There's a lot of groups of people that I'm not a big fan of. But the whole time January 6th is going down, I'm reminding myself, those are your clients. Regardless of what you believe, you are going to have to fight for. If you catch a cop that shot somebody, he's your client. Of course, he'll get a union lawyer because the cops have the cop shop and stuff. But as a public defender, when someone comes before me, it doesn't matter what my beliefs are. I have to vigorously advocate for them.
I tell you that I think that one of the maybe one of the common grounds I bet we all have here, surprisingly, maybe to some, is that when it comes to the Patriot Act, whether we are on the left of center, right of center, lean towards Republican, lean towards Democrat, whatever you want to call it. I kind of hate those terms because people always try to parse words with me. You know what I mean? I'm from Georgia. I'm a simple man. All right. Just like Leonard Skinner. The point is this: when it comes to the Patriot Act, I'm not a big fan of the Patriot Act. I'm all about going against terrorists that are out there trying to blow up Americans. Yeah, man, let's set them on fire for flamethrower. I got no problem with that. But dude, the Patriot Act can be turned against me just as quickly as anybody else. I have a huge problem with that. So if that was kind of set out to be a little bit of an argumentative point, you're not going to get any defense in it from me. I have some major problems with it, and I want to see some either one extreme limitations put on it or done away with altogether, because I think it gives the government extremely dangerous power, and in labeling someone, much as Doc has said, as a terrorist, and then all of a sudden putting them in a category below that of other fellow citizens.
Hear, hear.
Hey, Les, can I ask you to expound a little bit more on that George Floyd, Ashley Babbitt comparison?
Yeah, absolutely. So George Floyd was held up as a hero, that the police oppressed him, that that he died because of the actions of the officer and all this. And everybody conveniently overlooked facts that, okay, this man was a substance abuser and was probably in a condition that he was overdosing, going to die anyways. And the world exploded over that, the way he got treated by the police. Not being a lawyer, Micah, but from what I saw watching that trial, a lot of what I saw is maybe the police officer wasn't exactly that wrong in the way he attempted to do things. But again, I'm not an expert, so I'll defer to what happened in the trial. And then we take the case of Ashley Babbitt. She broke a window and crawled through it and was shot by a police officer. And that seems to be okay. Nobody's upset she's dead. I'm pretty sure that officer hasn't suffered the same thing that the officer that detained George Floyd suffered. He hasn't gone to trial.
He was cleared. He was cleared of that execution.
And I don't see any consequences. So law enforcement has done something to one group of people and without consequence, yet has done basically the exact same thing, i.e. killed a citizen and is off to jail. I think he's been sentenced to 20 years or something like that. The same thing. They've both killed a citizen and yet two very wildly different outcomes for what's essentially minor crimes that don't rate a death penalty.
Why do you mention the fentanyl part of that he had drugs in his system? What role does that play in terms of the use, or in terms of the force that the police officer used versus the Capitol Police on Ashley Babbitt?
I think I'm just trying to point out here that he was overdosing on a drug, which is illegal. He's committing an illegal act. He's, depending on which side you want to believe, resisting the officer and not cooperating. And his actions have landed him in jail. Now, Ashley Babbitt broke a window and crawled through it and was shot and killed. And from what I can tell, available in the press, nothing's happened to this officer.
Right. Well, go ahead, Bruce.
Just quickly, that officer was cleared of those charges. There's been an interview with that officer. I do have a huge problem with that. It may go a little bit to what Doc said, that this female was really guilty of nothing more than being within the proximity, even though she was nonviolent, of a congressman or woman, and therefore she was executed. And I have a problem with that. It's a dirty, ugly, slippery slope. And I'm not going to go too far into it because I know Micah mentioned initially, what if they were all armed? That might be very different, but she was not. However, the point being is that our government, our laws have determined that the guy who shot her, who was a black male, was cleared of the charges. He was doing his job. He was forced to do it because she crossed through one door into another room, and that justified his shooting of her and killing of her. It's an interesting comparison between her and George Floyd that I guess sort of shows how our law values life differently.
Yeah, both were committing a crime by our laws, yet both were killed in the commission of their crime, and yet the officers had entirely different fates. And one crime, George Floyd, it's been analyzed backwards, forwards, square and rounds, upwards, sideways, down. We know everything there is possibly to know about it. There was a big trial. All this information came out. Can anybody here name the officer that killed Ashley Babbitt?
Okay, so several thoughts here. And I think this is where I wind up being, I thought Britton asked me to be the liberal, and I'm really a centrist. I'm not a liberal at all. I'm very central. And so let me point out this one. Okay, so
yeah. That's even worse, Doc. Pick a side, goddammit.
I know. That's the other cool thing about this. No. I get that all the time. Oh, you're centrist. So you're wishy-washy and you don't take a side. I'm like, actually, no, I'm ready to shoot everybody in the face. All right. Now, here's what it comes down to. So the guy in the northern state, what was his name? George Floyd, with the cop kneeling on him. If George Floyd had died being subdued, then I would say, dude, you were fighting. and that cop had the right to self-defense, and they had the right to subdue you. You're breaking the law. He doesn't die being subdued. He dies on the ground, being kneeled on his chest by a cop. Now, you can tell me the cop didn't mean to do it, and I might even believe that and say, oh, he was just poorly trained. Okay, but a man's dead that didn't require an executioner. The crime wasn't big enough. The lady you mentioned in the DC, she was breaking the law. Her crime wasn't big enough to merit execution, and she was executed. The black gentleman in New York City, I can't breathe, forget his name. He was breaking the law. He was breaking the law. He was selling individual cigarettes on the street in New York City without a license. Hey guys, he didn't have a license. Now those 6 cops that surrounded him choked him out and killed him. I didn't say murder, although that's what it looked like to me. But I didn't say that. I said he was breaking the law. There's a law. You have to have a license. Those 6 cops could have surrounded him and said, you, into the van. We're taking you down to the county courthouse so we can help you get a license. Could you imagine? Could you imagine had the cops said, I'm a peace officer and you're doing the wrong thing. Let me show you, brother. Let me show you how to do the right thing. I'm going to take you in. I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you a loan to get the $55 license so you can sell those on the street legally. No, they choked him out and killed him. All right. Nowhere am I suggesting, so don't put words in my mouth. Nowhere am I suggesting that a police officer doesn't have a right to self-defense of himself, his loved ones, his other professionals. My God, when they put themselves in harm's way every fucking day, pardon my French, every bleep day, they put themselves in harm's way. And I love them for that because I'm not going to do it. And they do that. So they have every right to self-defense and to defend each other. But once everything is like, okay, we got it, it's established, there's no weapons here, there's no threat to anybody else, why are these 3 people dead?
And that's my point about how it gets us to a civil war. 2 dramatically different outcomes. And the fact that one side, one point, the authority is being punished, the other side, they get a big pass. Both people were killed while committing a crime that nobody sits there and thinks is worth the death penalty. I mean, no, we haven't laid a crime out here worth killing anybody over here, not even in the eyes of the law. Yet one person gets away, apparently scot-free with available information, and the other one is going to jail for a very long time. And then you start to have groups based on this go, look what they do to us, but they don't do to them. And those are the important terms, us and then. And then the one group goes, we have to do something to them before they do it to us. We have to protect us from them. And though that is how I think the flashpoint will start the Second Civil War, because we're very polarized right now. There's no, as I said in the beginning, there's no talking, there's no hearing the other side, there's no seeing the other side's point of view, and people are being forced almost to choose sides.
It's a good point. I kind
Some
of
of the
wonder.
comments we're seeing tonight.
Yeah, I wonder if that could lead. We're always looking for that flashpoint, right? What is the flashpoint going to be? Who knows? Nobody knows. But could something like that be the flashpoint? And here's been my observation, and you guys absolutely correct me if I'm wrong. But we'll take the case of George Floyd, for example. We had a lot of peaceful protests, particularly led by Black Americans and those in the poor neighborhoods that come from poor neighborhoods that had dealt with that for a long time. That doesn't lead to a civil war. I have no problem with peaceful protests. Nobody else does. At night, you then have violent protests, which are not so much protests, but more rioting, looting, burning of buildings, these type of things. But what also happened? You had areas like Portland, Seattle, up in the Northeast, where you have protests, but these aren't protests by Black Americans. These are protests by white Americans, Antifa types that are out there creating chaos and all kinds of problems. Could that then be the flashpoint where you've got people who really aren't invested in whatever tragedy has occurred, we'll say George Floyd. They're just taking advantage of a situation, creating violence, surrounding police stations, burning down federal buildings, governmental buildings, essentially out on the streets looking for a fight under the guise of some type of social justice cause, but really just looking for a fight, trying to say, bring it on, bring it to me, let's get something started. Is that what could kick off a civil war?
Sure, it's only going to take a group, and it doesn't matter who the group is, to think that they're marginalized and have nothing left to lose. And you can pick a lot of subjects. Abortion's one, the rights of George Floyd is another, the southern border right now. Look at that. That's a prime example that, a state could say, hey, look, we're being so overwhelmed, we're going to secede. That's a start for civil war. There's a lot of issues, and maybe what it is, it's a combination of several issues that does it, i.e. like Brent mentioned, they start going after guns forcefully. You have an abortion rights issue in the Supreme Court that doesn't go one side's way, and then you start having more perceived police brutality or injustices. It can all be not just one issue, but a confluence of issues.
I think you guys are kind of alluding to a possible solution to this. The way I see it, there's three outcomes. The left suffers under right-wing rule. The right suffers under left-wing rule. Or we completely decentralize and have states go back to a states' rights type system. Let Texas be Texas. Let them ban abortion. Let California be the abortion capital of the world. People like us have to have a place to go. We have to have a place to go. Donald Trump only lost by 7 million votes. That's it. That's not a whole hell of a lot of people in a country with a population of 330 million. He didn't lose by much. That's a lot of people who supported Donald Trump. And I'm not a fan of Donald Trump by any means. But when you have that many people who are probably unhappy with what's going on in the world, and there's a lot of hype on the media with Joe Biden. I can't remember where I was going to go with this. Real quick, how do you share your screen on this? Is that possible? Does anybody know?
Yeah. Just put it in there and I'll bring it in. And then Michael, you went dark, man. I don't know what happened to you.
I hope that wasn't me. Let me traverse here for a second. This is what's called the kyklos in Greek, or the anacyclosis, which is was a lot of ancient scholars like Plato, Aristotle, Polybius being probably the most prolific. This is found in Polybius book 6 if you want to look it up. It's the cycle of governments. And I was looking at this today, and I'm trying to figure out where we are on this cycle. And I think we're slowly slipping into mob rule with this. And that's dangerous territory, because look what it leads to. We're probably going to skip over monarchy. You can go right into tyranny. But we have a large group in this country who feels they don't have a voice. And I think it's largely the right, because we're being chastised. This may sound like a grievance and bitching and complaining, and it probably is. But we're being cast as evil Nazis, and I don't even know what a National Socialist is. I mean, fascism as a political doctrine is extremely vague. It's hard to define. I've been sitting here reading essays on fascism, trying to understand what fascism is, and I can't even understand it. But I think the direction that we have to go to prevent this, going back to one of Michael's first questions in this, before we kind of went back and forth all this, with the abortion issue, everything, I think what it boils down to is we need to go to a system where states' rights are prevalent. Let Texas be Texas, let Tennessee be Tennessee, let California be California. And we probably need to let things cool down for a while like that. And maybe we can come back together. But I know I'm unhappy under the current administration, being on the political right. I've got a lot of grievances, a lot of complaints. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this chat. And I'm sure there are people in this chat who were not happy under Donald Trump. There's some things he did I didn't agree with, banning bump stocks being one of them. But I think that might be an answer. That might be an answer. Let's decentralize. Let's go on our side. You go on your side, and let's cool down for a while.
Yeah, there's actually a movement out there to kind of do that. It's called the Greater Idaho Movement, where a big chunk of Oregon and the northern half of California want to join Idaho because politically they're way more aligned than they are with their state governments or specifically their state capitals. And I agree. I think that might be a great system because if you look at several states around this nation, it would work. Like if you live in Maryland, if you don't live in Montgomery, Baltimore, or Anne Arundel counties, your vote is irrelevant. You do not matter if you live in Western Maryland or the Eastern Shore. It just flat out doesn't matter because of the numerical imbalance. So why not have regions of states, align with other states that are more within their political views? Let Long Island be a state and let the rest of New York, live the way they want to, because you talk to people in Rochester and Binghamton, they got nothing in common with people in New York City, yet they're all under the same group. That might be a great way to diffuse the tension we have going on right now.
Didn't we try that
Yeah,
under the Articles of Confederation? Oh, I'm sorry, UG74. Go ahead.
Oh, it's all. Yeah, I agree. I agree with Chad. I feel that way too, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Where if you like a certain type of government, if you want government in your life more, go to a state that supports that. Go to a state that's that's why we have open borders between our states, right? To travel freely, to go wherever you want. I totally would love to see that. Will it happen? Probably not, right? Because right now, I think everyone is in their own mind, again, their own bubble, but they think their bubble is the right bubble when they should be concern themselves about, what do I really want? Let me go and find where that is, right? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? As an individual, right? Makes sense? Why don't you just go ahead, take that concept and go find it out there? Just like we're constantly told all the time, hey, you have dreams, go and get it. It may not be here in California. It may not be here in Texas. It may be in Florida. It may be in West Virginia. Go and get it. And I totally support Chad's idea. And I don't understand why people are so indoctrinated. They can't think freely. It's so upsetting. Okay. It boggles my mind. It's like, everyone will have their opinions on America, but I'm not from here. Okay. I'm an immigrant and I love it here, guys. Okay. I'm going to tell you that right now. I love it here. I couldn't have the stuff I have right now behind me and to my left back where I'm from. Okay. I would have to probably be down with some murderers, right? Keep some palms slippery, that kind of stuff to have the stuff I have over there. Okay. So, and I'm not from Texas originally. I immigrated. I lived in California from the north down to the south of California. So I've been all over California and I've seen it all. And I know all those types. So coming here and experiencing what freedom is and the ability to have more than what I could have had, what I put behind me, it's amazing. And again, let me go back to where it's so difficult for me to understand why people just can't think outside of the box, because they're so, again, and we've said it already, we're so hung up on watching our comfortable news, the one we go to, NPR, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, so on and so forth, and they're just so dedicated to it, and they won't cross-reference. Again, they won't cross-reference information or anything like that, and again, then that stagnates the mind. And again, I go back to what Chad said. I completely support that idea. People need to go find your happiness. If you're in a place that's, I'm not going to say you're going to get 100% what you want. That's impossible. But if you can get 70, 80, maybe 90% of what you want, and it's somewhere else, go and get it.
Amen, brother.
Santiago, you're up, brother.
Santiago may have froze. issues of Santiago?
Yeah, it looks like he's got some red bars. So, nonetheless, the American flag in his background is badass. So,
leave him up. I'll say this, and I would like this. I would like to get Micah and Michael's maybe opinion on this. You know, it was Alito that said that we haven't had states' rights since the Civil War, and I agree with that. I think we need to be careful about wishing for a civil war. You know, one of the great things, great in terms of influential size and impact that came out of the Civil War wasn't anything dealing with slaves, blacks, or any racial inequalities. I think those issues would have resolved themselves in a short period of time without the Civil War. We had female voting in the 1930s. What is that? 60 years after the Civil War. I think those things would have happened anyway. Maybe not at the moment, but they were inevitable with the mechanization of farming and whatnot. I think it would have happened inevitably. I think that one of the really big, profound changes that we got out of the Civil War was the loss of states' rights, where all of a sudden we decided that states were no longer more powerful than the federal government, but the federal government was more powerful than the states, and the federal government could dictate what states do. I have seen a trend in the my lifetime, last 40 years, leaning towards states' rights becoming slowly more and more important and slowly more and more recognized. I think that's a good thing. And I think that's much like UT 74 said, that may be a imperfect yet solution to many of the issues that we have. If you want to, you look at whatever's most important in your life. Guns most important in your life? Go to Florida, go to New Hampshire, go to Texas, whatever the case may be. Abortion, the most important thing in your life? Go to California. Travel's easier now than it's ever been. Take whatever political issue it is that's most important to you, find a state that best fits those, pack your shit and move, and be happy and enjoy life and love your time there. And it does away with all of this talk about civil war, fighting and killing one another. Let's agree to disagree, find a state that fits you best, and pack your shit and get there. And if you're like me, come to Texas. We'd love to have you. If you're like some, I don't know, whatever, you want giant social programs where you pay a ton in taxes, and go to California. Maybe that's a state for you. Go to New York. Maybe that's a state for you. I won't look at you as any less of an American. It just tells me where your priorities are. Love you just as much. Maybe that's a solution to prevent civil war. I don't know. But like I said, Micah and Michael, maybe you can give me a little input on what you think about that.
Share the beard.
Well, go ahead.
No, go, Mike.
I mean, just and some of the things that I've studied along the way have definitely struck me as being disappointing to myself and my understanding of how things work. But the reality is, we live in America is a system of federalism. The bottom line is the federal government, in order for our system to work, the federal government has to be able to trump the states. However, you're right. As I study the cases and as you see how things develop, states are just over the years more and more restricted from what they want to be able to do within their states. And I think that the federal government, I don't think the federal government should pass, like, everyone's like, oh, we need a law. We need less laws. We need absolutely less restriction on what the government's doing. We're choked to death with laws that don't even work and are on the books. But aside from that, you're right. States should have power. But the thing that the states have done with the power over the years has been like criminalizing burning the American flag, for instance. There's states that were really, that triggered them. And it's funny to see who's triggered by words and phrases. In the 80s and 70s, right-wing people were really triggered by people burning American flags and talking shit. Like, it's a constitutionally protected right. You're going to have to deal with that. So these states, they pass the laws. And like, we talked on Texas and abortions, and there's like when Trump first came to office, somebody had a bumper sticker that said, fuck Trump and fuck everyone that voted for him, and the sheriff of that town wanted to come after him. He said you need to take this down, and this, that, and the other. Like, states do have freedoms, and they know what's best for themselves. They should be left to be able to mostly govern what they do. But when they cross over, the system of federalism has to be able to work. The federal government has to say, I appreciate that you want to do that, but you've crossed what the Constitution restricts what the government can do, both federal and states. Whether, through the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, the states can't deprive anyone just as much as the federal government. It's a restrictive covenant. And I appreciate them trying to pass all these laws. And the 10 Commandments was another one a state tried to put up, that they should have the 10 Commandments in all the elementary schools. And that was struck down because that's the government endorsing Christian religion to a certain degree. You have to be able to give states their power, but they have to be able to work within the confines of the federal Constitution.
Yeah, it's it's a balance, right? But essentially, before we had this Constitution, we had the Articles of Confederation. That's essentially where each state was its own individual entity. They printed their own money, and it didn't work. Texas was its own republic. As much as Texans talk about, oh, the good old days when we were our own country, it didn't work out too well, and there's a reason why they joined the union, in order to be more profitable, essentially, or more successful. As I view the federal government, the purpose of the federal government is, of course, to uphold the Constitution. And one of the big things where a lot of our laws are passed under is regulate interstate commerce. I would think that all this panel would agree that if there's a state that's limiting the rights of a certain group of people, whether based on skin color, religion, what have you, that the federal government would step in and say, hey, this law is unconstitutional. Certain things were environmental protection. Okay. A reason where the federal government steps in there and why we have environmental protection laws is, let's say you have a factory that's dumping sewage in the Mississippi River, upriver, from a farm or some community that's downriver in another state. If we were all individual states, that person or entity or whatever would have no recourse to seek damages against that other state. And also, the government wouldn't be able to levy fines against that entity or put them in jail if it was really bad. So there's a purpose of the federal government. Obviously, you don't want to have unnecessary or overburdensome laws, but there's a point there. And I think that, let's say you take it for those that advocating absolute state rights and no federal government. I bet you $1 million that, let's take Texas, for example. All right. So states' rights. I guarantee you're going to have someone in Dallas say oh, well, the capital, Austin shouldn't be able to tell me what I'm to do with my property and pass laws that way. It should only be the city of Dallas that should tell me. And then, someone's going to say, well, I'm in a different county than the city of Dallas, but still within Dallas County. I should be, I should only have to listen to county. Someone somewhere along the way is going to take it all the way down to, this person on my street is the mayor, and that's the only motherfucker, sorry, that can tell me what to do. That type of thing. So, in my point of view, there's a set, there's a set purpose for the federal government. Obviously, one is to represent the United States, also a military force. Although, hell, I think Texas could put together its own military force that would rival most nations. But yeah, that's where I see that the value in the federal government.
Yeah, I agree with Michael that I'm not saying completely get rid of the federal government. Of course, there's going to be issues that are beyond states' capabilities. I believe that, but and I think that's why we can all agree that we need to get the government to enough with their overreach.
Jump in there, Richard.
Oh, I think his comms are down. Man, I've been trying to get these guys. First, we lost Britton, and then Santiago.
Well, regarding the, I mean, yeah, definitely limited government. They need to be held accountable. I mean, a lot of people just let them, get away with murder over and over. Still, damn, dude. Am I frozen?
Yeah, I think you're.
Hello.
I think you got some
Mic
lag,
check,
brother.
mic check. No comms?
Loud and
We
clear.
got you. We got you. Go ahead.
No comms? Shit.
We got you. Yes. Go ahead. All right, he's down. Somebody else pick up the fire.
I'll say this. I think that what a great microcosm of the country. What a great microcosm of the country.
I lost my
Right.
train of thought. I mean, a lot of tension. I agree with. UT mentioned earlier how frustrating it is to see other Americans just not want to think for themselves.
Go ahead, bros.
So I think what we got here while Santiago works on his comms, he's probably on dial-up down there in Florida. He's a cheap sucker anyway. I think one of the interesting things I've seen here, including with the chat and the panel here, is that we are so splintered on different issues that we sort of think are important or divisive issues within the country. There's not clear boundaries between one idea and the other.
And he has to log back in. It looks like the same thing.
Santiago brought in the big guns. See, his wife's getting him straightened out right now.
Well, this took a whole turn, right?
It did take a whole turn, but I'm telling you that one of the there's no clear difference between views here. Therefore, how do you have a war between one side and the other when neither side can agree on what's the main reason that they're fighting for, right? Right. And so, Santiago, it's time. Just check out, bro. You're done. You're over. Poor Santiago. Now I got my wife getting involved in it. But if we are, and I think this is true within the country, is it's splintered in all these different. You look at any city, any big issue. What do you got? You got abortion, you got gun rights, you've got taxation, you got voting rights. It's all over the place, right? Until there's two clear sides that have got clear lines dividing one another and they're ready to go to war over it, maybe that's our safety check. We can have all these small, completely unorganized disagreements among one another, and that's our safety check. That's what keeps us from going to blows over the whole thing. Maybe that's the secret in this country, is that we're so diverse on opinions and how we feel so strong that it keeps us from fighting one another. And maybe that's a good thing.
You're 100% right. I had a professor that said the most dangerous thing on earth is factions. One group with too much power is one of the most dangerous things on earth. The only way to mitigate the danger of a faction is to create as many factions as possible. Because though you won't agree with me on abortion, we agree on Second Amendment, or we find there's other areas that we're able to find common ground on. So one group isn't too much in the right. And you're right. There's so many different issues. There's so many different ways we could be looking to find more common ground with people we don't think we have common ground with.
Yeah, I agree. I remember hearing something that a lot of people have been talking with other people from other political sides, and there's a lot more in common. We can agree on a lot of things. It's just it's not spread throughout the airwaves. It's much more subdued. It's much more local, and we don't get to hear it from the big mouths talking on TV. But yes, there's a lot of common ground. I have tons of left-leaning, whatever you call it. I hate it. I hate using those terms, just like you guys at work. And they're worried about their safety. They talk to me about firearms. How do I prep? What do I do, bro? I'm behind, right? And these guys, they're they don't follow gun channels. They don't follow Brent or me or Bruce. They're watching hip hop videos, watching booties bouncing on Instagram, right? And they want to know, like, dude, when we just had that riot downtown, and I'm not far from that. I'm scared, dude. I'm feeling behind. So there's a common ground. Absolutely, I truly believe in that. We just have to talk to one another, be able to listen, and again, not so be polarized. Get rid of the polarization in our own selves.
Yeah, but how do we do that? I mean, we're saying that, but how do we do it?
Doing it right now, Chad. Come on, man.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're not radicals. None of us here are radicals or reactionaries. We're all, pretty level-headed. We're having this conversation, but there are tons of people out there who end up on the news, whether it be on the left or the right, who aren't having these conversations. So my question is, how do we include everybody in this?
To answer that, it's, I'll I'll go down the Doc Larson avenue. He knows this. I know this. I'm sure some of you guys know that. God works on us one person at a time, and that's how we have to approach it. Because it's like, if you guys have ever been in retail, right? You speak to one person, right? About they had a good moment, a good experience somewhere with this person. Guess what? They'll tell 2 or 3 of their friends, and that's how the word is spread. And again, it's slow, right? It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be, this dam breaking. But if people like us here on this panel, keep that up, we've already reached people. We've already reached out and touched people in our own ways and got them prepared. Doc's doing a really great job. Brent's doing a great job. Bruce is doing a great job. I'm behind because I stopped for a while, but that's what I mean. It's going to take a while, but we have to ask, am I in this or am I not in this?
Michael, what you got, man?
Micah or Michael, man?
Micah.
No, man. I feel like everybody's touching on it, and your people are right. Like, the past couple of years, I've seen the media in a different light than I have in the past, and I knew that they were full of shit to a certain degree. Like, from the first time I deployed, and you do the war, and then you read about it when you get home, and you're like, I mean, yeah, kinda, you're like, that's a way to put it, I guess. Like, you're just like, and then as the years progress and you find out who funds these things and the money, that's a tough decision. You want to talk about a decision that's controversial to grapple with. Citizens United said money is speech, that you can essentially spend as much money as you want in the spirit of free speech. Not necessarily a direct contribution, but you can create these mega PACs, super PACs that have all this money that can ultimately fund as many commercials and things like that as you want. I think people, people need to track down the source of their information more. I feel like that is a real hard pill to swallow. And it's not a conspiracy to say Bloomberg puts out news and Bloomberg has ideas that he wants to push. Bloomberg doesn't like guns. Bloomberg funds Mothers Demand Action. Bloomberg funds these huge gun groups. He has an agenda. Anything that says Bloomberg News is going to be spun that way. Murdoch in the Fox News industry is no different. The money, these conversations. And you know what I like about the YouTube? And you're watching the world react. Netflix is putting out their own movies. Hulu's got the Hulu originals and stuff. YouTube, when are you going to have a panel like this? And I see people calling us morons and this, that, and the other, but we were on the front lines. We fought for democracy. I don't know if we're uneducated or whatever. We're all speaking our minds. We nutted up while all these people are in the comments telling us how they should have done it. All of us went up and tried to push this torch forward, and we're still doing it. There is no reason for you to have a YouTube channel. There's no reason for me to be here tonight on my Christmas vacation. You know what I mean? Like, there's all kinds, but we're having the conversation. We're pushing the ball forward. These social media platforms, while they can create division. They're useful to a certain degree. It's a double-edged sword. So I think you guys are right. We're having these conversations, and I think many Americans are absolutely capable of having these conversations. People need to have these conversations. Well, I think it's funny that you're not supposed to, it's taboo to talk about religion or politics or something like that around the dinner table. How the fuck do you think we're going to get any better if there's off-limit topics that we can't be able to talk about and come to an understanding and move forward? I don't know. There's division here, but it's as far as a civil war being inevitable, I don't know. You talk about, this is the one thing that popped in my mind I wanted to mention earlier. I was talking to a Mormon about the pandemic and all that stuff that's going on, and he's like, it's really funny. People in my church some of them are really against the masks. And they're, our religious freedom and blah, blah, blah. And I can't help, and I didn't even know this. Apparently in the Mormon religion, as you move along, depending on your development, your underwear changes. You wear different underwear corresponding to your level of involvement in the religion as you progress. He's like, so you're allowed, the church can tell you what different underwear to wear along the way, but the mask, that's the hill you're going to die on. That's the one that you want to, Roger that. I mean, just having conversations and bringing people together and understanding where we are, where we need to go, and how we get there. I don't think civil war is inevitable. I think that the media likes to push it. I think that there's benefits to having us divided. I think the government's the big winner there. When we're at the point where we're begging them to take over because we can't control ourselves anymore, that's a problem. But I think so long as we're able to still have these conversations, as long as people with opposing views can still be able to converse, and we shame on our fucking leaders and shame on the media and shame on them for not setting better examples for the American people.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
all of us here could be sitting in Congress having this conversation just fine, passing legitimate legislation. We don't need to get on our soapbox and talk about, so-and-so doesn't think that fucking, I don't know.
Hey guys, I want to jump in real quick. So we're at the 2 hours, 17-minute mark. I want to start wrapping this up. So I think we've had a fantastic conversation, and I know I'm going to invite these guys back in the future. We're not going to have world peace over one live stream in the middle of the night. So what I want to do is go around the horn, starting with Les, and then we're just going to finish this up, say your final words. And then for those of you on this panel, understand that when I end this live stream, it doesn't go black, it goes back in the lobby. So you guys don't have to pop smoke right away. U274, I'm talking to you, brother. Anyways, long story short, let's go around the horn. Start with Les. Final thoughts, all right, before we close this out. Go ahead.
This has been a super interesting topic. At the beginning, I was like, yes, I think there will be a civil war in the next 10 to 20 years. Nothing we said tonight has changed my mind on that, but I don't want it. I definitely don't want it. I don't want my children to grow up in the aftermath of what this country would be if a civil war happens. One of the things to remember, civil war is the nastiest of all war. It's dirty, rotten, mean, brutal. There will be atrocities. There will be concentration camps. There will be ethnic cleansing. Look at all your modern civil wars. It's all there. What you don't see in civil war is things like you saw in World War I and World War II, where they would have truces to go exchange, collect the wounded or exchange prisoners, or wow, the Red Cross would come across from one side and say, hey, look, a man lost his leg. You can paradrop a leg to him. Things like that are not going to happen. Civil war will be the nastiest thing that happens. And even if one side eventually wins, the price they pay will be dramatic. It will be like our original Civil War, where it was brother against brother and family member against family member. We all know how bad it is around the table at Thanksgiving when we don't like our relatives. Imagine when we're all shooting each other. So while we're discussing this and hopefully trying to find a way for it to never happen, just remember that if it does, it's the worst possible outcome. And we haven't even touched on what the rest of the world would do if the United States devolves into civil war. Because let me tell you, every country outside our borders will have a vested interest in what goes on here.
All right. So when did World War II begin? What year? And arguably, World War II began in 1919 at the very end of World War I. I started this discussion saying that I do believe that civil war will happen. And yet I take that, I personally take my own words with a grain of salt, and you should too. If it happens, and God forbid, scholars will for hundreds, maybe 1,000 years say, when did the Civil War begin, this third Civil War? And I would say, quite possibly, it started in 1865. I made the argument it started in 1954. You can also make an argument it started in 1865. As both Bruce and Micah have already pointed out, there are three branches inside the Constitution. It enumerates three branches of American government in order of preeminence. Let me say that again. In order of preeminence, they are the people, the state, the federal. I didn't say there's three branches of federal government. We know what those are. I'm saying the three branches of American government, as enumerated in the United States Constitution, are the people first and foremost, then the state, then the federal government. The federal government was the weakest. It was designed to be the weakest. It has certain, now it's the weakest, but within a certain given, articulated, let's say, issues or conditions, it becomes the most powerful. Well, the end of the American Civil War in 1865 saw that turned on its head. And we've discussed that this evening, that the federal government is now the preeminent part of the American government. And it was never designed to be that way. And so this is problematic. And we could argue the next Civil War begins with that turning and of everything on its head. All right, so what are the conditions? The conditions are simply this for civil war: deep polarization of the population. Number two is that we will dehumanize our opponents. They won't be human, they'll be less than human, right? And then number three is some kind of catastrophe. And I don't know what that matchstick is that we throw in the tinderbox. I got to be honest, these last 2 years I've been holding my breath saying, is COVID-19 that catastrophe? Is this where we'll say unvaccinated, unmasked people are the subset, the less human, and let's go ahead and exterminate them now, put them on the trains, get them in the camps? Is that where we're going? And I've been watching that, so I don't know. So then we say, okay, that's a pretty dire prediction. What's the cure? I think we've talked about that here. We've talked about state balkanization. And after all, after the people, the state used to be the strongest, next strongest in order of preeminence. So shall we go back to that, states' rights, and balkanize so that everybody gets their own, I can live the life I want to. And why shouldn't we be able to do that? I think the other part of the cure, and we've talked about this, is either one of two things. We can go one extreme or the other. We can end all political parties. End it. Done. There is no Republicans, and they're outlawed. There are no Democrats. It's illegal. Claim to be one, go to jail. Or we need to end the two-party system and its stranglehold on the United States people, and because we buy wholeheartedly those narratives, and then we stay in that echo chamber. And again, I'm guilty of doing this myself. So this is what's at stake. I said I think we are headed that way, but I also temper that because as other members of this panel have said, I've literally been listening to, there's a civil war coming since 1977. All right. Let's hope for better.
So it's up to our hands. I was trying to figure out, Googling who said it was Thomas Jefferson. It's like, I gave you a republic if you can keep it. It's up to us and what we do for it. It could go either way, and I'll leave everyone with this food for thought. I would say make sure you know what you believe, make sure you know why you believe what you believe, and make sure that you get the opposite view of what you believe, and make sure you can articulate clearly and concisely what the other view is before you're able to have that debate. You have to be able to give that same mutual respect to somebody that you expect yourself to have. You want to have your rights, you have to be able to understand other people. We were talking about it earlier. You had your rights. So it's up to us where we go from here. And it could look it at times it looks bleak, but at other times there's shimmers of light. And I think we're nothing's set in stone. And I think we have a republic if we can keep it.
Well, I'm an optimist. I believe in this country and its laws and its institutions. And essentially, as long as those institutions are functioning as they're supposed to, and that people, and more importantly, that people believe in those institutions, and that essentially that they can resolve conflicts and whatnot, then we'll be okay. But they're certainly under threat, and things move in different ways. In terms of like gerrymandering is a very big threat to this country, because essentially when you have districts, voting districts that are drawn in a specific way to only benefit one party and not the other, then people become entrenched in that side, and then they feel like they lose their voice. So on a state level, for example, with the oh my god, why am I just blinking right now? The delegate process, of states. Republicans in California feel like their vote is erased in the national election, and Democrats in Texas feel like theirs is erased, and so that leads to lower voter participation. And when you have lower voter participation in an election, then that leads to not being engaged and saying like, what does it matter? And then for those that are really angry about it, wanting to take matters to more extreme. So those are things that we need to work on. I certainly advocate that. Like, why do we have this delegate system? Why not just make it one vote across the country, and whoever has the biggest popular vote wins the country or wins the election? But I digress. There's a great house, great bones. It's easy to tear something down than to build it. And some of the bones are a little rickety. We just need to move on it, work on it, and keep improving, and move on from there. Thank you guys for having me.
Let me thank you, Michael, and Micah also. I think that y'all brought a view that was a little different than what some of us normally expound here, and you are just proof that our similarities are much more in common and in line than what our political affiliations that we wear on our shirts may make other people think. So thank you guys for being here and contributing. I do hope to see you again. Thank you, chat. You're out of control as always. In terms of civil war, I hope that we never see it, but if we see it, let it come tomorrow so that I may die there and not my children or grandchildren. And I'll just leave you guys with this one great quote from one of the greatest Americans ever, Axl Rose: "I don't need no civil war."
Show your sweater one last time, please. Thank you, sir.
Merry Christmas.
It's hard to follow up with that horrible Christmas sweater. So I have to admit, I did a lot of prep work for this topic. I didn't get to some of the stuff that the conversation kind of went sideways. Hopefully we can do this topic again, maybe stay on track a little bit more. But it was an interesting conversation nonetheless. I don't want civil war. What do I think it'll look like? I don't know. I know which side will win. That's the side with the guns. So, but I was reading a book last week, and the book is called Hunter's Gatherer's Guide to 21st Century by two evolutionary biologists. And I think I want to close out with one of the conclusions that they mention in this book, because it's what I believe, but it's articulated a lot more better. It's articulated a lot better than I can put it. And the authors state, we need as many people as possible to get on board with this discussion, to mature into adults, and most importantly, those are my words, to discard their utopianism. We need people to welcome the idea that some set of values has to be broadly embraced and pursued, and to recognize that we are not going to arrive at a decent future by describing it precisely in advance. We're going to reach it by agreeing on the characteristics that such a desirable and plausible world must have, and then we must prototype, evaluate the results, and prototype again. We must find the foothill and discover the path from there. We will navigate through the fog, and we will not have a blueprint. We must start now. We can't wait until the hazard is so clear that we all agree, then it will be too late.
Once again, I want to thank Brent0331 for having me. These podcasts have been a lot of fun, and I just want to say I agree with majority of you guys, and that a civil war would really, really suck. It hurts everyone at every level. Okay, and the people who it won't affect will be the people who make the laws and pass these laws. They get to hide behind their ivory towers. That being said, I want to say that for me, listening to the hype, growing up in Los Angeles and being around people with minority and basically walking both sides of the fence. All right, I used to be a former Democrat, and I'm no longer that, and I don't want to be labeled as anything anymore. But what I've learned is it's not about your skin color, right? It's not about that. And sometimes maybe it can be about the way you present yourself to society. But what I've learned in my experience living here in the United States, it's about class warfare. And the media and the government are good at manipulating the masses, us, into class warfare. They're really freaking good at it. And that's what I believe is crippling us, right, is the class warfare that they're creating. They use the guise of the whole race card, but essentially at the core, it is about class warfare. Who has the most connections? Who has the most money, right? If you don't make a certain amount of money, you're down at the bottom, right? And you don't matter. It's the people who have the money, the power, the influence are the ones who generally have the control. And once I learned that for myself, things became a lot clearer to me.
All right, I guess it's my turn. So, man, what an amazing panel. I invited specific guests on here tonight so that it wasn't just an echo chamber for however long we've been speaking. And it's been nothing less than that. I mean, it hasn't been an echo chamber. It's been, back and forth dialogue, and I really appreciate that. And one thing I want to point out is, I'm watching some of these comments, and people were commenting to some of the things that, some of the guests have said tonight. And I want to remind you guys that Micah has served 5 combat tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. 5 combat tours. All right. Michael served a combat tour in Iraq. And I don't agree 100% with these guys on everything they've said, but by God, I respect the living fuck out of them, and I would run into enemy fire to fucking rescue those guys if need be. And I know damn well that they would do the same for me. And why? Because they're freaking Americans. All right. These guys are patriots. I don't have the same political views as them. Okay. but by God, they're freaking Americans, and they are patriots. They love their country, and not everybody sees eye to eye on every little thing. And the sooner we can realize that, the sooner we can avoid, catastrophic failures like a civil war unfolding. I don't want no damn civil war, but by God, I have weapons, okay, and I will defend my family if need be. But I don't want it to come to that. Not at all. I've got two little guys. I got my old lady sitting here. She's like hiding over here. I'm pulling her in. She's sitting on the sidelines. I don't want to get her wrapped up into no freaking civil war. You can rest assured that. And the one thing the way we avoid that is coming together and talking things out. Hey, freaking September 12th, 2001. I've never seen such a united country in my life. That was amazing. For the country to unite after a tragedy, and you better believe we were divided before that. Okay, so I still have faith that this experiment that we call democracy will work here in the United States. I still have faith that we can come together as a country and work things out. But I think it takes both sides realizing that there are trigger points, and my trigger point is firearms. All right, stay away from the damn firearms. Don't impede on our liberty when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms. Okay. And those of you on the left, the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can stop impeding on those rights. All right. And then we can sit down at the table and further discuss, what we can compromise on. But the Second Amendment is not a aspect of compromise, in my opinion. So once again, guys, I want to say that this has just been an amazing conversation having you guys all on here. So anybody got any save rounds before we close this out? Good.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again sometime. I'm serious. This topic.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we're wrapping it up at the 2-hour 36-minute mark, and I appreciate everybody joining on, my panelists, and as well as the comment section. I don't know who won the civil war that was raging in the comment section, but definitely there's got to be some casualties in there. So, y'all have a good night. Thanks for watching.